he was talked into it. He thought it was a good idea. He was talked into this very simplistic idea of it. And when it turned out to be a lot tougher than he was led to believe, he decided to walk away. And he's just basically pulling out of what he feels is a bad deal and trying to enter into a new deal with Iran, who now he praises as reasonable people.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. Delighted to welcome to the show the author of Unpopular Front on Substack. He wrote the book When the Clock Broke, Conmen, Conspiracists, and How America Cracked Up in the Early 1990s, about the, David Duke and the right-wing media ecosystem. We're going to talk about that. He co-hosts a film podcast, Unclear and Present Danger, with Jamel Bowie. It's John Ganz. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Tim?
Well, I kind of feel like I'm in college again because I was up vomiting all night and I had to meet with TA this morning to discuss some reading. Caveman and Marie Rothbard, and we're going to do a little René Girard. So it's we'll be okay. It wasn't the fun kind of vomiting though. So you got to carry me.
Okay, I will do my best. I will do my best. I was not vomiting so far as I can remember. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Not the best evening. All right. We I just want to start for people who aren't familiar with your Substack, which is great. Give us a little baseline for your politics. JVL on our internal Slack was calling you one of the good socialists. I don't know if you accept that moniker, but why
What's
don't you
the
give
good
people
part
a
or the
little,
socialist part?
either. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you could say I'm a social democrat. I would say that's how I would identify. That's the tradition I feel closest to. I mean, that's
like David Brooks.
Yeah, like David Brooks used to be. I hope I don't have the same trajectory. I think I'm too old for that now already. Yeah, I think, but that's part of the socialist tradition. It's one part of the socialist tradition historically, and it comes with a commitment both to an economy that tries to work for everyone, and also a commitment usually to liberal democracy and a robust free society.
Okay, so give me if John Ganz was in Congress, like who would you be? Who would your doppelganger be?
My politics are almost like that. I mean, I very, very rarely disagree with anything Bernie Sanders says. I gotta tell you, yeah, and we're very temperamentally similar, I think. Elizabeth Warren is someone also I have a lot of admiration for. AOC, I was very excited about her rise, and I support Zara Mamdani. So these are my politics. Basically,
I've had too many Bernie people on the pod lately. We need a cleanse.
Yeah.
I need a cleanse. I need to get Joe Manchin back on the pod.
Yeah, you got to find somebody to the left of Bernie to put on the pod, like some PSL people or something like that. I could tell you how he's a revisionist.
I'm open to it. I want to start with just kind of Trump administration stuff. Then we're going to go back into your book and the origin of how we got here on the right. And you wrote this, which resonated with me, which shouldn't surprise you, given that I've got to wake up and talk about this nonsense every day.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the second Trump administration, I wrote that I wasn't enjoying my job anymore because it was at once too easy and too awful. The people in charge are evil, stupid, or both, and those who support them are either evil, stupid, or both. That's all there is to say over and over. Anything else strains the truth.
I stand by that.
Stand by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what I wrote after that is actually it's become more difficult and not as easy, because I find that when you write political analysis, you usually attribute motives or reasons for people's behavior. And sometimes those reasons are ideological. Sometimes they're self-interested. Sometimes they're in the context of partisan politics. And, that's how you try to make it legible for people, and you try to, put your spin on it, will maybe advance your politics a little, but generally try to communicate the truth. With the actions of the Trump administration, it's very difficult, I find, to give them any coherence, because it's so based on Trump's personal whims and his own, very idiosyncratic and mercurial way of doing things. So I often find that when I attribute, some kind of ideological thinking or some kind of project, anything they do, a week from then, the line has totally changed. And they're, usually their coalition, a presidential coalition, has tensions, but theirs is in like open confrontation with each other all the time, which is unusual. A president usually like undertaking a project like going to war, say, right? Now, usually you would imagine, I mean, this is the way we used to think about politics. They would try to they would first have their own party very much on board, and then they would use that as a platform to get the rest of the American people on board. Now, Trump didn't even have his own party on board going into it. So it's a different type of politics than, we grew up with and we're accustomed to commenting on. And it very much is the Trump show. And he does not, he personalizes everything. He is not able to think in terms of systems or abstractions, ideas like the market or. You
don't believe that Donald Trump can abstract?
I don't think he can, basically. I think basically he has the reason why he likes, or he is sometimes swayed by conspiratorial rhetoric is some people are ideologically conspiratorial because it sort of supports their worldview. I think that Trump is basically psychologically incapable of understanding things as processes that don't have like a person behind them. That's the way he's always done business. He always thinks someone's trying to screw you or you're trying to screw somebody. Big systematic shifts in the world don't make, and you can see the way he runs the economy. He runs the economy. The idea of a deal is like a one-off kind of carve out where you make some compromises. Now, for the behavior of businessmen and firms, that's fine. At scale, you have to have rules. So you can't have a million different rules for each type of business. There has to be, some rules across the board, which is why the tariff policy looks so incoherent. And why, most of his policies look so incoherent is because he basically doesn't have the conception of the economy as a system. He has it as a conception of, okay, this guy's in my ear, wants a break for his business, and I want this business to do that. It's just a consistent kind of making of carve-outs and making exceptions, and you can't have nothing but exceptions. It's just total chaos.
Maybe this is just another way of saying the evil, stupid frame, but isn't it really just that Trump is a megalomaniac and everything that he's doing is in his personal self-interest and it's enriching himself and his family. And it's just that sometimes he has the illusion of knowledge and doesn't realize what's in his interest. And so he does shit that ends up being not in his interest,
No, that's about right. I think that we all don't exactly have a perfect idea of our self-interest, but he definitely seems to be, his instincts lead him sometimes, I think, to be, to make mistakes in his political career because his idea of his self-interest is extremely narrow and not very subtle. But he can also change course. Unlike, say, he has some instinct that, listening to Stephen Miller about every single thing is probably not the best idea.
Right.
And, but he keeps him around. So
where do you feel like the Iran war and the latest one we have kind of fits on the evil, stupid?
It's both. It's both. It's really remarkable. It's a war that had no public support. Look, I am not an expert in foreign policy in any way. I read the news, and just like a lot of Americans, and I've been following politics for most of my adult life. I knew, basically, and I think we all knew, anybody who has half a brain knew, that this was not going to end up in a way that was favorable to the United States or the world at large. That it would be some kind of catastrophe. In fact, this is kind of on the lower end of the catastrophes, but it did not end up. It's a completely absurd situation. We engaged in this war. It didn't accomplish a single strategic goal for the United States. They were talking in the beginning about regime change. They were making all this noise, all this grandiose plans. And then we basically have nothing of like that. And we're going to go to something that is kind of a weaker version of the JCPOA. And, it seems as if basically, and this goes back to his decision-making process, he was talked into it. He thought it was a good idea. He was talked into this very simplistic idea of it. And when it turned out to be a lot tougher than he was led to believe, he decided to walk away. And he's just basically pulling out of what he feels is a bad deal and trying to enter into a new deal with Iran, who now he praises as reasonable people. And before they were lunatics and so on and so forth. If you go back to the way he behaved in New York City and the way he carried on business deals and he carried on his behavior with politicians trying to get those deals across, it was always like this. It was a lot of recriminations, huge statements that he would never work for somebody. This guy was crazy. He was a lunatic. He was the worst. And then they, the next week he's trying to make buddy-buddy, or vice versa. He has a close relationship, working relationship with somebody, and then they have a terrible falling out, and he's saying all kinds of horrible things to them. He speaks in a way that is guaranteed to make headlines, to stay in the news all the time. That is extremely, but it can't entirely be taken seriously. He's a self-promoter extraordinaire. There's a term called mere puffery, right? In advertisement. So you can't say a reasonable, like if you say it's the best coffee in the world, I can't sue them for false advertising because that's obviously, just an piece of advertising rhetoric. Trump's almost every word is essentially mere puffery. Like that's his functional mode of discourse. And so you can't really take any of his declarations seriously, which makes, I'm sure, doing diplomacy with him very hard, or doing any kind of business with him at all very difficult and hard to get in, and he's extremely unreliable. I have a little schadenfreude, as I think many people do, as the Israelis having such a hard time with him and being so shocked that he would. What did you think? Who did you think you were dealing with? He's notorious. Have you not been you thought you had the special key to his heart? Give me a break. I mean, we're so friendly and he's so good to us. He can change his mind at any moment. He's dropped old friends. He can drop some political ally when it doesn't seem like it's going his way. Consistency is not his forte. And he, to his advantage, he's able to change course very quickly. And
should have bribed him.
Well, I'm sure that they probably tried and are doing something, there's some, but I think the real people who are excelling and bribing him are the Gulf states, probably.
Yeah.
And that may reflect the approach here.
I'm a big coffee drinker, and I used to think caffeine was the only way to get the energy and focus boost I need, but recently I've been trying mud water instead of coffee, and I gotta say, I'm liking it. Mud water is a coffee alternative made with mushrooms, we love mushrooms, and adaptogens, about 1/7 the caffeine of coffee, so you get the focus and energy without the jitters, crash, or anxiety. If you're like me and you love coffee, but sometimes the caffeine sends you straight into an anxiety spiral, mud water might be the solution for you too. With mud water, you get the same morning ritual, coffee, chai, or matcha, but with functional mushrooms and adaptogens instead of a full caffeine hit. Steady energy, no spiral. The best way to start is the starter kit. It's designed to set you up with everything you need to actually build the habit. When you order, you get the full-size tin of your choosing blend, plus a free rechargeable frother, free gifts, and free shipping. There are actually 4 flavors: OG, coffee, matcha, and turmeric. It's turmeric, right? If you live in Venice, you know whether it's turmeric or turmeric. Ready to make the switch to cleaner energy? Go to mudwater.com/thebulwark and grab the starter kit. Use code THEBULWARK and you'll get 43% off. The frother alone is worth it. That's right, up to 43% off with code THEBULWARK at mudwtr.com. After you purchase, they'll ask you how you found them. Please show your support for our show and tell them we sent you. I want to go back to an early 90s Trump because this ties to your book in this period. The title I really like, When the Clock Broke. It's about a Murray Rothbard speech. I kind of feel like your publisher had to hate it, though. My publisher hated when I proposed them kind of like weird self-referential titles and, wanted it to be very straightforward, but it works for me.
My agent didn't seem to think it was going to be a good idea, but I convinced the publisher of it pretty quickly.
Okay, nice. I want to get into kind of the political, like philosophical, if you even want to call it that, underpinnings of this. But you have an interesting insight into that, like about how Trump is a bit of an unfrozen caveman from this period too. And Trump was obviously not influenced by the writings of Murray Rothbard, but his obsessions and his instincts were kind of developed in the same time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a way, well, Rothbard foresaw the type of politics that Trump practices as a path forward for like the hard right, which is basically a kind of what he called it at the time, right-wing populism. He was looking at David Duke running in Louisiana and how the media kind of freaked out about it. And he said, this is the way to do it. You know, you go around the media, you short circuit the media, and, you talk directly to the people, and you attack, your enemies and the bureaucracy and the elites and the liberal elites. And, you get a lot of people very excited, and, it's a very bombastic style. So he envisioned the style. I would say the policies, or insofar as there's any kind of coherent background, Trump is a guy named Sam Francis, who envisioned, basically a kind of U.S. under a kind of dictatorship, but that was like a developmental dictatorship that was highly protectionist, that would try to protect American businesses, that would also adopt this kind of aggressive foreign policy, but it wasn't aggressive foreign policy, a unilateral aggressive foreign policy, an America first foreign policy. So that was the kind of people who I saw as being harbingers or prophets of Trumpism. Now, Trump himself, obviously, he doesn't exactly is not a big reader. I'm sure was not aware. He was aware. He saw Pat Buchanan and David Duke running, and noted. He said, "Look, they're doing well because there's a lot of anger in this country," and he, for a very long time, had these protectionist instincts. Essentially, he temperamentally goes along with this ideological program, which is that the United States' relationship with the world is adversarial, and our so-called allies are trying to screw us. Immigrants are sucking up our resources. It's a very zero-sum, hostile and paranoid attitude towards the world. And, insofar as a philosophical articulation, these guys do it. But, you can also just boil it down to certain instinctual or habitual behaviors and beliefs of Trump that he picked up through his life. He also, don't forget, Trump experienced a near brush with ruin in the late 80s, early 90s. And I think that this intensified his paranoia and his attitude to the world as being an essentially hostile place. He found his negotiations with the bankers, which ultimately came out quite favorable to him because they could have ruined him, to be very humiliating. And he wanted to take revenge against a lot of people who he felt had not stuck with him through his hard times and turned on him. So I think that the early 90s, the 80s was a great boom time for Trump. That comes to an end at the end of the 80s. And he sticks with a lot of the same preoccupations. Urban crime, urban crime is on the decline, but that's an obsession for Trump. If you go back to this era, this is the era where Japan, South Korea, and at that time, West Germany, their imports, were very competitive with American manufacturers. You see this the same, and there was a current of opinion, which Trump was, shared, which is that, we need to protect domestic industries. And I think that basically Trump is also in this kind of late Cold War period where our, those under our protective umbrella are now becoming our competitors. You see it also in his attitude towards immigration. This was, the Reagan administration was fairly liberal on immigration, but there was a current of opinion that started to get more and more, paranoid or hostile that immigrants were harming the national substance of the United States or taking up resources. Across a number of different ways. I think his obsession with Russia has to do with his notion that Russia is still a power on par with the Soviet Union. This is right. Also, he's very obsessed with this summit diplomacy that he must have seen Gorbachev and Reagan engaging in, and the pomp and circumstance with it. So his idea of Russia is just, these are the Soviets, we need to treat them with respect and so on and so forth. And that suits Russia just fine because that's exactly how they want to be perceived. I don't believe, obviously. I mean, I also think that Trump temperamentally finds Putin's mode of government to be appealing. I think that he likes his way of doing things. He's a bigger gangster in a certain way. I don't know that he has direct desire to help Russia because of, whatever.
Right. Yeah, sure. P-tape. I'm trying to figure out why, as I was listening to some of your interviews on this, like the emergence of this, kind of mindset, this kind of right populism in the period of the early 90s. This stuff was bouncing around before that, right? And it's not as if there was not, kind of right populist thought before. I mean, a lot of this was in, kind of like mailed newsletters and Republican campaigns and like things with this notion. And so I was trying to figure out like this question of like when you were on Chris Hayes' show and you guys were talking about this, like why 1992 and 2016? And you guys as progressives like both fell back on economic anxiety, basically, like the economic structures that were happening at these times. And I'm just like not sure if that's right. Like to me, it feels like it's more about mass media and like that there was this like undercurrent of right populism in the country that needed, basically bombastic media figures / politicians to be able to, reach them. And like a lot of these people weren't reachable. It was hard to organize this sort of thing prior. What do you make of that?
I think they're both. It's both and. It's not either or.
Sure.
I think that basically, yes, the fragmentation of media has opened up the doors for a lot of things that would not have made it into, the previous ecosystem of media, and that is a boon to all kinds of crackpots and charlatans and politics that were once fringe. There's no doubt about it. But that the appeal of these politicians only makes sense if you consider the trajectory of the society and the fact that you have large members of the middle and lower middle classes feeling increasingly squeezed and dispossessed and feeling feeling unrepresented by their politicians who they feel are intrinsically corrupt. I don't think that Trump comes along without the 2008 crash and the feeling that there's something, rigged about the system, as he likes to put it. So I don't think you can really disentangle them.
Yeah, not represented is a good word though, because this is another thing I was thinking about. And this is why I'm not like I'm of the view that the Republican Party is like not returning to anything resembling anything from before when the clock broke. Well, I guess unless you're counting like Lindbergh, unless you're counting about way before. But because another variable about these two times, as I'm thinking about, like why is Buchanan rising in 92 and why is that successful? Why is Trump successful in 2016? And I think, it's because this is what Republican voters really wanted. Like the Republican voter id was always Buchanan, culture war, Trump, but the elites of the party managed to be able to kind of control the animals a little bit. And then you have like H.W. Bush and Mitt Romney, God love them, like we're both particularly ill-suited to kind of be able to bring that crowd into more of a mainstream conservatism. Reagan and then H.W.'s son and W. Bush both both had a folksiness that kind of allowed them to bridge it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I do think that, the new right that coalesced around Reagan. And, Reagan was not the first choice for a lot of those guys. They wanted somebody crazier, like the way John Connolly became. Reagan was kind of too moderate for some people in that version of the new right. And then they kind of grew to love him and realized he was sort of one of them. But the people I write about exited the Reagan years feeling betrayed and let down that he wasn't, more radical rightist. For people on the left like me, that sounds wild because we think, Reagan was an absolute catastrophe and could not have been more right wing. And as Buchanan said, the biggest vacuum in American politics is to the right of Ronald Reagan, and there was a constituency for the type of politics they practice. It became apparent. Wallace campaigns showed that it was there. So, and it's not entirely. It overlaps with let's say the Republican primary voter, but it's not entirely partisan because I think this is what you have to understand about Trump is he also, and what I was trying to get out of my book, he also encapsulates the spirit of a third party candidate, right? Of a candidate like Ross Perot, who comes out and says, the parties are crooked. I'm going to reform them. I'm going to change everything. So there is a populist spirit, which is not entirely contained in either party, and in fact can attack the party system itself. And if you look at the way Trump takes over the Republican Party, he kind of attacks it as a almost a third party kind of candidate. He's not connected with any of the existing power structures. He's connected with kind of a mass movement in the Republican Party because he's a Tea Party figure, but he's not connected really so far, and with the elites that generates. But he's not connected to any of the old party structures, and that makes him appealing, right? Because there's a feeling of betrayal, a feeling that those people aren't tough enough. I mean, the Massey quote where he said, "Oh, I realized that they didn't care what I believed; they were just voting for the crazy son of a bitch." It's one of the most insightful things about American politics anybody said in about 20 years. So yeah, there was a desire on many levels for a figure like Trump, and it was contained, but it couldn't be contained permanently because the voters got fed up and they said, "We don't like the candidates you're feeding us." And in that way, it's democratic. I mean, Trump's first election is not through democratic means; it was through the concocted system of the Electoral College. But in terms of the way he took over the Republican Party, he won those primaries fair and square. There was a huge enthusiasm behind him, which I'm sure you guys all remember. But the internal party democracy of the Republicans allowed Trump to happen. The Democrats still have a little bit of a intact party structure for good and ill.
Summer changes how I get dressed. More tank tops. You guys don't get to see that on the podcast. But in addition to that, you want pieces that feel lighter and more breathable, things that are easy but still put together. That's why I keep coming back to Quince. They focus on high-quality essentials that feel and look amazing. Think breathable linen and soft organic cotton, well-made basics, but without the luxury markup. I've been wearing that European linen shirt. I was never a linen shirt man, really, because of all the wrinkles, but the Quince linen shirt is coming out of the dryer looking just nice for me. Been wearing my linen shirt kind of over the tank top sometimes. Been looking good. You might have seen me yesterday in my blue short sleeve button-up shirt with the piping. I saw somebody in the comments ask me if that was a sponsor. Yes, it was. It was Quince. Yesterday's podcast. You go check that out. You find it on quince.com. Maybe the best part is that everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and Quince goes way beyond clothing. They got upholstered sofas, ceramic cookware, premium bedding. It's the kind of brand you end up recommending to everyone. Elevate your summer wardrobe. Go to quince.com/thebulwark for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. That's QUINCE.com/thebulwark for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thebulwark. I want to get to the Democrats in a second,
Sure.
but your comment about Trump and how he, despite, being the three-time Republican nominee, still kind of represents or positions as a nonpartisan figure or as some kind of outside figure.
Yeah.
The kind of big news in right circles yesterday is a clip from Tucker Carlson, what he's said on a show in Canada. He was speaking to Uncensored Canada. We're exporting our crankery as well. So Tucker on the show said this: "I would not support the Republican Party. There's no chance I'd support it. Not going to support the Democratic Party either. How could I support a political party that is not loyal to the United States? There's no defending this. I'm out."
I don't believe that for a second. First of all, again, like Trump, and Tucker Carlson has been in media for a very long time. He knows how to make news and get into headlines. He also probably, and he does that instinctually. He's got to be interesting. He's got to always say something. So he goes on the news and he says that. It's the same thing that also he's mirroring what people to his right have already said is he's just copying Nick Fuentes at this point, who's been saying the same thing. Nick Fuentes goes farther to be provocative and says he's going to vote for Democrats. He's going to change his mind. So is Tucker Carlson. They're making news. The other thing about Tucker Carlson is I don't think he remembers half the things he says, and he makes outrageous statements all the time. He said that he thought that, you know, this administration was ruled by the Antichrist. And then he was on the Times and they said, well, you said this administration is ruled by the Antichrist. And he said, I never said that. I don't know if he was lying or he just doesn't know the truth from anything. The guy, these people, I mean, you know, we're part of it, but in a certain way, but I don't think in exactly the same way. They basically have an ongoing discourse, verbal diarrhea. And I don't think that they really pay that close attention or that careful about what they say. They don't say, oh, I said this, and to be a principled person I have to stick by it. I'm sure by primary time Tucker's going to have his guy, and the fact that he said that is going to mean nothing. People are going to play the clip over and over of him saying, I'm not going to support Republicans. Well, he's not going to care. He's not going to care. He's going to say, well, actually, this guy, probably J.D. Vance, is fine. And you know what? Frankly, he might be setting himself up for his own run. There's been a lot of speculation for a long time that Tucker has ambitions in those regard. And the only reason why you think that might not be true is because, you know, a lot of his friends and family work for J.D. Vance and they seem to have a buddy relationship. So does he really want to compete directly with them? I don't know. But I just don't think that you can, like, even paying attention to that seems to be kind of stupid. I mean, like, he's just making noise.
Two things to that. Later in the interview, he does talk about JD, and then he discusses, like, basically how this is why he's a media person and JD's a politician, because he couldn't be in JD's shoes. He's in this impossible situation. The vice president, you know, works for the president, can't be fired, and it's a very hard. And he's like, I believe that JD, you know, realizes that this is a mistake. This is kind of the Iran war Israel partnership element of it, and I think that he is trying to, like, at least position himself as being an outside air cover, I guess, for JD. But yeah. In the context of the book, that I do think it's interesting. Like, he is leveling the same critiques of the right populists from the book, you know, from the era you're talking about, you're writing about.
Especially when it comes to Israel. That was a big issue for them even at that time when it wasn't quite so salient. I think it's extremely dangerous and irresponsible to pretend like Donald Trump, that first of all, J.D. Vance wasn't part of the policymaking apparatus of this administration and didn't have a hand in making this decision, and that Donald Trump is not a grown up who doesn't make his own decisions. I mean, like, they support a guy who they seem to implicitly say in their discourse is swayable and controllable by other people. So, like, what kind of a person is that? What are you doing supporting this person? And they're creating this narrative, this kind of stabbed in the back narrative where, oh, well, you know, MAGA was great and we were going fine. And then the Israelis, the Jews came along and screwed it all up. Well, Trump screwed it all up because he, unlike every single other U.S. president, and didn't see through the fact that Bibi's rhetoric and ideas about this were unrealistic and crazy, and he had his own political needs to take care of that had nothing to do with the United States and nothing to do with, you know, protecting our interests, and just said, go fuck yourself. I'm not going to do it. Trump was the only person stupid enough or you know, mercurial enough or whatever to try to roll the dice. And I think he rolled the dice because his administration was sinking on every other issue. You know, don't forget, this comes to not long after the tariffs thing. You know, I think you have to put every decision in the context of what is going on in the news for Trump shortly before. And if he feels like he's being weakened or he looks bad, he makes these improvisational decisions based on the needing to appear strong. The president happens to have a lot of power in foreign policy and war-making powers, unfortunately. So that's an area he can make an immediate impact and try to make a big splash when the policy part of his administration is pretty much a flop. So, you know, I think that that's what he was thinking with the war, and he thought it would probably be something like Venezuela, a simple matter. And anybody who is an adult who's read the newspaper can tell you not the same story at all. But for some reason, every or 15 years or so, the United States forgets how to think, and we think that the world is some simple place, that we can manipulate at will, and we're going to go in there and then we're going to knock over their regime. And people who ought to have known better because they lived through Iraq were like, oh yeah, well, maybe it'll work out this time. I mean, I'm sorry, like it's just astonishing to me, like the amnesia that Americans have about, even some people who were critics of Trump went, well, about this thing. Oh, you mean one of the most unrealistic and potentially catastrophic things he could possibly do, which is to pick a fight, start a war with another power with no idea what was going to be at the end of that war. I think the United States basically showed itself to be not that powerful. He made a lot of big noises, like he could affect a lot. Now they realize, we got to kind of just take what we can get here.
I did not actually suffer through communion. Producer Ansley did. J.D. Vance's new book for me.
Yeah, I haven't read it either.
Sent some sections.
Yeah.
It's a section I want to share with you.
Sure.
I noticed you were on the Know Your Enemy podcast. Shout out to our guys over there. We've been on a couple times. But one time I was discussing René Girard.
Yeah.
And you won't be surprised that René Girard gets a shout out in communion. There are two sections I want to read to you. The first one is how J.D. Vance came around to seeing the error of his ways with regards to atheism.
Ooh.
Peter Thiel impacted me in another way. Possibly the smartest person I'd ever met, he identified very openly as a Christian. He defied the simple social template I had constructed that dumb people were religious and smart people were atheists. I began to wonder where his faith came from, which led me to René Girard, the French philosopher under whom Thiel had studied at Stanford. Girard's thought catalog is rich enough that my summary won't do it justice. His theory of mimetic rivalry, that we tend to compete over things other people want, spoke directly to some of the competitive pressures I had experienced at Yale. So it goes on, but I just wondering what your kind of initial reaction is to that origin story.
René Girard believes that people essentially, mimic each other and want the same things, and that leads them into inevitable conflict. And that's the heart of his kind of philosophical anthropology and description of the world. And the upshot for him is the only way out of this is religious faith. So the whole thing is kind of a Christian apologetics. I don't think, for me, what he's describing there is not really being moved by religious sentiment. It's kind of realizing that the smart people that he wants to be in with are religious, and then kind of changing his tune. And he said, oh, well, I want to impress Thiel, and so I'm into René Girard, and that's mimetic behavior, like Girard describes. You start to copy people because I think Thiel is smart, therefore what Thiel pursues. So he projects, I think, and I've always believed that J.D. Vance is deeply wounded by the kind of entry into America's elite that he had, which is that he's a bright guy. He went to Yale, but he comes from this underprivileged background. And I think he like Richard Nixon before him, who was a bright guy, but really resented elites and their condescension towards him. I think that, he really has a chip on his shoulder about that.
It's funny. There's another clip of his. I was watching Bob Costa was interviewing him and Usha together about the book, a joint interview. And I just thought it was like really unintentionally revealing.
I thought you said Bob Costas for a second. I was like, that doesn't make sense.
Well, maybe. Who knows? He could be rebranding. Everybody's a podcaster these days. Right. Here is Usha Vance explaining why she didn't convert alongside JD. I think it's pretty telling.
Evolved alongside his own.
Well, I think in some ways it has been a very personal journey for him. I grew up in a Hindu household, a very stable household, and I've not felt the same sense of need to seek something different that he has. So I think the journey has been more in our relationship, right? Trying to understand where he is, the different ways he's thinking about things, how that fits into the life that we have together. And less a religious journey of my own.
I thought it was like so funny that I thought the clip was so funny because she's like basically saying like, yeah, JD was wounded. his ego is wounded by the lack of a father figure, and maybe by the people looking down their nose at him at Yale, and this is all part of his self-discovery, more than it is actually a religious endeavor.
Well, I think that one knock you could make on Girard in general and this approach to religion, and a lot of conservatives' approach to religion, quite frankly, is that no doubt many of them are sincere, of course, but they usually relate to religion as some kind of social or psychological necessity. And that's not quite the same as believing, right? If you say, well, it's better for society if we do that, that's not quite saying I believe in the literal truth that, of this religion, and that, God is communicating through its representatives. It's something much more utilitarian. So I think that Girard's philosophy is an entry point for people whose viewpoint on the world is fundamentally not one of faith. It's one of reason. And this seems to be a rational picture of the world and how it works and why people are competitive. And it's extremely, what Girard is right about is that being involved in these social competitions and desiring what others want and being in these mimetic, basically love triangles, is extremely painful. Living in competitive society is extremely painful psychologically, and it's very difficult to feel like you've accomplished, very much, because there's always this endless regress of, this person has something I want. So the appeal of religion then is, it seems that Girard said, well, instead of imitating others, imitate Christ. And, he was the only person not infected by this. And yeah, I can understand, the pains of living in a competitive society. One would want to escape that and take a more contemplative stance towards it. I do think, it seems to me, that these fellows have a very utilitarian, almost cynical relationship to religion.
Yeah, you don't say.
That is not one of deep feeling. I don't know. I've not read the book, but does he describe, being in the presence of God? Or is it like Augustine's Confessions, where he has this very, this realization that his former life was deeply sinful? I don't know.
Well, he does shout out his mistake about the childless cat ladies. You mentioned the love triangle, and I do wonder if maybe that, I don't know if you know that Dinesh D'Souza and Laura Ingraham and Aaron Coulter were in a love triangle back during the early 90s.
I'm very sorry to have learned that, because it's a totally repulsive prospect, and I'll never forget that. I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, the professions of conservatives to moral rectitude, everyone knows that's a hypocrisy. Everyone knows they're just like everybody else.
I want to read one more quote from the book, and then we'll do Democrats. Girard's work captured so well the psychology of my generation, especially its most privileged members. Mired in the swamp of social media, we would identify a scapegoat and digitally pounce. We're keyboard warriors, he goes on, blind to our own failings. Mm-hmm. It's hard to imagine how you can write that without, reflecting on one's own failings, of the author's own failings. But JD manages to do that. Well, he thinks he's talking about the cancel culture libs, I guess.
Yes. Okay. So that's the other part of Girard's philosophy. He believes that basically society scapegoats, picks scapegoats, and this is an outlet for aggression that would otherwise, lead to kind of a universal civil war all the time. So we scapegoat people, and his solution is he thinks Jesus was scapegoated, but he was the one person who was totally innocent, so therefore it revealed the mechanisms of scapegoating, so on and so forth. What I think that Thiel and people like Thiel and Vance take from Girard is not, we ought not to, in order to be good Christians, in order to be good people, we ought not to scapegoat. They say, well, that's kind of the way the world works, so we're going to pick our own scapegoats, and we're just going to make the right people are scapegoating. I don't think the man who repeated the slander against Haitians eating cats, I don't think that person really can say with a lot of sincerity that they're against scapegoating. So I think that essentially that's another side of the cynicism, is that Girard gives them a picture of the world, of a humanity that's irrational, competitive, prone to violence naturally, scapegoats people. And then they kind of say, and then Girard himself says, well, this is why Christianity is necessary and why, there is an escape from this. But they sort of say, well, that's just sort of the way things are.
Yeah, and it works.
Yeah,
works.
and it
You
works.
can tell it worked.
Right.
One of the things I really wanted to explore with you is this, one of the political problems Democrats have is, I don't remember who I stole this from, and I've said it a lot, so my apologies, is the crank alignment under Trump. And where a lot of people that resonated with the politicians and figures in your book, had been Southern Democrats, that were kind of racist Southern Democrats. They were voting for they were part of the FDR coalition. So a lot of them had been kind of independents that were not really part of the political process, maybe voting for Perot, maybe they voted for Clinton one time, and now fast forward today, and Trump has kind of united all of those types of voters inside the Republican coalition. And as Democrats try to think about how to handle that challenge, there's a school of thought that's basically like, fuck, whatever, the social justice woke thought that's like, fuck those people, whatever, and then there's another school of thought that maybe is, the Platner might be an example of, which is like, we need, kind of a bad boy of our own, a working class figure of our own to reach them. Like, how do you think about the political challenge of reaching these kind of aggrieved voters?
Well, I think it's going to shake out the way it's going to shake out, and this whole primary season and electoral cycle is going to see who. There's probably going to be some coalition, a mixture of the two. The Democratic Party will be, an amalgam, as it always has been. I do think there's a populist tradition of the Democratic Party, obviously. And perhaps Democrats have moved too far away from that populist tradition. That's independent of the merits of any particular candidate or defending any particular candidate. I think if you look at the first run of Obama, Obama comes out of a wing of the Democratic Party, which kind of doesn't exist so much anymore. But it was kind of the Howard Dean part, progressive side of the party, which was anti-war, a little populist, but, not Looney Tunes,
right.
not Dennis Kucinich, right?
Yeah.
So
Mike Gravel.
Right. So it was kind of, I don't know, you might want to call it like moderately populist. And that was kind of what it meant to be a Democrat for a while. And I think that spirit is good and fine and actually necessary. And I think it will appeal to people, who feel that alienated from politics. I think Trump's coalition of the alienated obviously was extremely fragile and temporary. And many of the people he brought on board, he quickly alienated himself, and they're up for grabs. Are they all going to become Democrats? No, some of them will just be demobilized.
Sure.
But I do think, yeah, of course, like a politician who seems to be a fighter against entrenched sloth and privilege and systemic corruption is going to appeal to a certain type of voter. I don't think that the appeal to we are competent technocrats and is really going to work, especially since, okay, so the argument coming
this leads to your Pete skepticism. I went back and looked through our Twitter history of you dunking on me on Twitter, and your first ever, no, that's okay. No, it's great. Your first ever Twitter dunk on me was over me being too gushing to Pete. You were like, he got exactly what he deserved. This was like right after he dropped out.
I mean, he's I'm not as hot, like, maybe I'm less hostile to him now than I was then. I think that he's demonstrated a lot of seriousness and is genuinely, he does seem to be kind of going a little too in set pieces. He seems a little stiff to me. I think John Ossoff is a little bit more like the Pete Buttigieg, who's a little more spontaneous. So
I'll give you a homework assignment. You should go listen to John Ossoff on this podcast a couple months ago and report back to me.
All right. Why? You think?
We'll see if you still feel that way.
All right. Okay. Well, I've seen him speak in publicly.
His speeches are really good.
Speeches are good. Okay, that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
No, and I will agree with you. Yes, Pete's appearances in the talk show circuit have been quite interesting now, and I think that he's positioning himself as a kind of radical reformer, which is an angle perhaps in the primaries, which will be one of the angles. he's got to find some ire, and that's because it's going to be a cycle where Democrats are angry at their own party, angry at the Republicans, and they're going to want somebody who seems like a fighter, and is going to change things. The Democrats do have a little bit of a nerd problem. Also considering that the technocrats, let's say the Biden administration was the test run for the competency and technocracy. And wasn't that the Obama administration?
Well, I think the Biden administration was like Biden having a couple of old timers around him and then outsourcing the policy making to Elizabeth Warren wonks.
Well, yes, but those people,
what happened.
That's true. But it was there was a lot of people who were, highly qualified, educated people who had all these advanced policy ideas. And then the perception of people's actual experience of it, of those policies, is a lot different than they want. So I'm saying that they had it, and also he was not in great shape as a messenger for all of it. So yeah, I would say it depends. He was not. I'm not saying technocrat as synonymous with centrist. I'm just saying there was a highly wonkish aspect of the Biden administration, which I was very friendly to because I thought their ideas sounded great, and I think some of them actually worked, and just didn't draw attention to them. But yeah, I mean, the thing is like the kind of social democratic ideas that Biden tried to implement were sunk partially because of inflation, which is an issue that every politician seems to be kryptonite for everybody, and there's not much you can do about it. Yeah.
On those kind of reform questions, and you mentioned that Pete's trying to do radical reform. Yeah, this is something I've been meditating on. It's something that I have like two wolves inside of me on this question, which is assuming the Democrats get back into power. How do you solve the Biden problem of 2020? Of people not feeling the positive change, and I think that the predominant view within Democratic circles is going to be, we should be more aggressive in using the levers of power that we have in order to get policies done. Yeah. Biden kind of did trying that with the student loan thing, and it backfired, right. So this is like a little bit of an easier said than done. I think a lot of people are like magic wand, we're going to start doing it. Then there's like another view, which is, okay, we need to reform the whole system and take less power away from a future demagogue and, fix things. And this kind of question, you wrote something a while ago about about what we could learn from, I think it was the French in the 20th century, and this question of the Senate and how to deal with the Senate. So anyway, I just kind of, in that, you can take that wherever you want. I'm just kind of wondering where your head is on that.
I mean, I'm personally conflicted as well. I mean, I am sympathetic. I'm highly sympathetic to the belief of fellow people on the left that there are deeply undemocratic and unrepresentative parts of the U.S. system. That, is it fair that New York State has 2 senators and North Dakota has 2 senators, and that makes the proportional representations of those places so out of whack? I don't think so. Is it fair that the judiciary, which is packed with conservative justices, have so much power? I don't know. But on the other hand, as this second Trump administration has unfolded, I have to say, the checks and balances are real. I mean, perhaps not Congress, unfortunately, but more you see this in the judiciary, institution I never really had much regard for. Now, unfortunately, I think the Supreme Court has made things a little easier for Trump in some regards, but also, rejected key parts of his policy. So, I'm, I guess, a little bit more of a constitutionalist than I was at the beginning of the Trump. But I will say that is tempered by the fact that the parts of the Constitution that were supposed to protect us from a crazy demagogue, ironically, allowed him to take power in the first place, right? So the idea that those mechanisms are so essential to prevent abuse I don't know. And I do think that perhaps if they were reformed and there was a more muscular mode of governance, the desire for a kind of strongman figure might be lessened, because there would be less sclerosis and less frustration with the political system, and people could see it working. Are you ever going to get rid? Are people ever going to be totally happy? No.
No.
So am I worried about like a future Trump? I mean, having less, checks on their power. I feel like they've learned, like, whoever has authoritarian designs on the United States has learned plenty, and I don't think that they're going to need that much help. Yeah.
It's kind of where I end up falling too, which is frustrating, which I don't like it. I want to circle back to Platner really quick though, because part of the reason why we invited you is because I had professional jealousy over your Platner article, because it was another thing where I think we're in a similar boat where we're grappling with the question of Platner. Like, I totally recognize the appeal to Maine voters, and like that is what democracy is. And you have this old governor who wants to compromise, running against an old senator who wants to compromise, and you've got a young guy who's basically like, fuck these people, we need to care about your economic interests, I'm going to fight for you. And he's from Maine, and they get it, they know the type of character. I get it 100%. I don't think that it's sneaky anti-Semitism among the 75-year-old Maine Democratic primary voters. I get it. On the other hand, so there's the Maine Platner that you write about, and then there's kind of the Platner as a figure, as a national figure that is an avatar for this kind of factional fight within the Democratic Party. And on that, he's a little more complicated. And my professional jealousy was sealed when you pulled a random Simone de Beauvoir quote that just nailed him. I was like, where did you fucking pull this from? So this is so good. It was it just had
the ethics
him,
of ambiguity.
Describing him as this adventure lost soul. So anyway, for people who haven't read it, why don't you
I think that his character is legible to me. I could be wrong. I can't see into his soul, but from his behavior, from his activities, I think, he's a person who yearned for adventure, who yearned for a more authentic feeling life than was given to him. And those types of people can be very charismatic and wonderful and do great things in the world, and they can also be very dangerous and really only kind of nihilistically interested in their own self-expression and so on and so forth. Which is Platner? I don't know. I would say I would rather Platner on our side than the other side. I would say, from my perspective, he's lending his powers for good. I'm, pleased with most of the things he says. He's not said anything that I find particularly offensive or worrisome. We share very close politics. I don't like the fever pitch hysteria on denying that he could have possibly, look, frankly, I just find it intellectually insulting to believe that he didn't know that was a Nazi symbol when he got it. I think he got it.
He obviously know.
Because he can't say, yes, I know I got a Nazi tattoo, because everyone's going to be like, what do you mean? But because what he was doing was, and it seems like everyone doesn't have a conception of this for whatever reason, even though it's, to me, very understandable. He did it to be edgy. And if you say, well, that's too offensive, well, that's the whole fucking point. It's a taboo.
I get this 100%, by the way. So this is, somebody can clip this and use this against me if I'm not ever running for Senate. But when I was in college, I was being edgy, and we have various, overlaps and dissimilarities between me and Platner. But my buddies went to Ole Miss, and I got old Colonel Reb gear.
Sure.
And brought it back to my dorm room to troll the Northeastern libs. Yeah. And it wasn't I want to bring back the Confederacy.
No.
I'm scared of needles, so I didn't get a tattoo. It was kind of a trying to be a bad boy kind of thing, just silly and childish.
Yeah.
Right. But that's what happened. That's what happened. He got the tattoo. Maybe he didn't know at the exact moment, but eventually he knew. And then he thought it was funny and edgy and whatever. And so he didn't get rid of it. He didn't keep it because he's a fucking secret Nazi.
No.
That's why he did it.
There would be much more. Look, those people are not that good at hiding their politics. There would be a lot of other things other than the tattoo that suggest they have those politics. And I don't think being a critic of Israel is a sign, frankly. So I mean, I'm very sensitive to signs of Nazism, and I just don't see any in Platner. Frankly, he doesn't strike me as that sort. Now, in a different historical era, different conditions, would someone like him be attracted to fascism? Sure, but so would many people, right? I would say that, you know, his adventurous streak and maybe the slightly nihilistic and boundary breaking thing, yeah, he could get into that. But it seems like, you know, as an adult, he's has an ethical worldview. And is that ethical worldview always been expressed consistently throughout his whole life? No. But the story that he has matured and become a better person is trying to do civic service. It's a plausible one.
You weren't negatively polarized by the reaction.
I think that's a bad way
stands.
of going about thinking about the world. It's tempting, but you can't, like, this is a problem. Like, a lot of the people who I thought who were going to the mat for him, I was like, you sound like an idiot, and I don't like that you insist like I sound like an idiot. But I don't think that your judgment of the world should be, you know, affected that much by, okay, well, the, you know, assholes really like this guy, so I don't want to be on the asshole team. So therefore, you know, I think that really deforms your judgment. With that being said, he definitely, what people are projecting on him, what he represents for certain people, I'm like, well, that's stupid too. But I don't think that that's necessarily Platner's fault that they're projecting that onto him. Maybe it helps him in a certain way. But so, no, I really try to avoid that sort of habit of thought of being negatively polarized.
Here's a more concerning part within the coalition for me than Platner. There's a story yesterday. Dan Goldman is running tonight in the primary in New York. He's going to get his ass beat by Brad Lander,
Sure.
Which is democracy. That's how democracy works. But like, Dan Goldman was an impeachment manager. He's a conventional, down the line, liberal, progressive. He was out there defending his chief of staff vociferously when these right-wing assholes were posting pictures of him in like leather gay outfits, and Goldman was coming to his defense. He is a J Street type pro-Israel liberal, not an AIPAC type. And
so is Brad Lander, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And he goes into a coffee shop, Poetica, in New York, and they said they were going to deny him service, but they didn't recognize him in time. So they posted a picture calling him a genocide lover, and, you know, they don't put, and they refunded him the money. And, that activity on the left starts to head more down the path of anti-Semitism to me. I don't know that Dan Goldman deserved to be denied sitting at the counter because he has like some conventional progressive views on Israel.
Well, yeah, probably not. But you have to keep in mind that, I mean, the common sense on this has shifted enormously in the past couple of years. And I don't believe, I think that, you know, it gets ridiculous and it can edge on anti-Semitism. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of people live in a previous world where Israel is perceived very differently, and they're having a rude awakening because, you know, the fact of the matter is people they didn't grow up with Israel as this brave little country standing up to big enemies all around it. They grew up with the occupation. They grew up with Gaza, and they have a very different perception of it, and they view Israel, like they say, as, you know, they use the word apartheid as people would view South Africa or Rhodesia as kind of rogue, racist country. And they have some good reason to feel that way. So I just think that there's a generation gap, and older people are very shocked.
There are several other apartheid countries, though, and it seems like Dan Goldman's the only one that's getting denied his coffee.
Well, I mean, is there any others that we, directly give their military so much aid and just went
We're cutting a deal with Pakistan right now.
Sure.
I don't know that their internal politics.
I mean, is there? I mean, is there the focus on Israel
Qatar
is because, well, yes, I mean, I am no friend of the UAE, but, you know, Israel right now, those places are not great places. You cannot deny that Israel post October 7th, and maybe for some understandable reasons.
No, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that Dan Goldman should be able to get a cup of coffee in New York.
Sure,
and
whatever.
it's a little concerning.
Yeah, I think that, you know, is I don't think that that's a systemic problem. I mean, there are many Dan Goldmans in New York getting coffee just fine. Thank you. So, I don't think New York City has to worry about a spate of anti-Semitism.
We'll keep an eye on it. All right. We're going to close with a rapid fire. You famously had the jock creep theory of fascism, where the Italians were the jocks and the Germans were the creeps. I Googled the German word for classic example, and that is Musterbeispiel. So I would say that the Musterbeispiel examples of this would be Stephen Miller as the creep and Pete Hegseth as the jock.
Sure.
So I'm going to rapid fire to you other figures in the administration. You tell me where they are.
Okay.
Greg Bavino.
Jock.
Carrie Lake.
Jock.
J.D. Vance.
Creep.
Stephen Chung.
Jock.
Carolyn Levitt.
Jock.
A lot more jocks than creeps. Who are some other creeps in the administration?
Miller. Michael Anton, but he's not part of the administration anymore, would be another example. I'm sure there's a lot.
Todd Blanche is jock. Yeah. At the high level, Trump picks the jocks. Trump picks the jocks.
Camera facing is jocks. I mean, Trump's the jock.
Yeah, right.
Vance is the creep. That's the coalition right there. A lot of, Tucker is a jock, but he's a prep. That's something, a little bit of a synthesis. So, there's probably a lot of people we don't know about in the policy wing, or staffers who are, but pretty jockey.
It's notable how jockey it is. Yeah. I can find Umberto Eco, the Ur-fascism, like the parallels to Trump are so much more on the nose than the Hitler stuff.
Oh, for sure.
And so there you go. So it's jock fascism. We'll leave it there. Anything I didn't ask you? Anything you want to illuminate the Bulwark audience on before we let you go?
Please subscribe to my Substack if you think I sound like I make sense at all, and buy my book. It's out in paperback, and that's it. I'm hopefully going to have a new book that I'm going to be working on soon. So I can't talk about it yet, but it's a little teaser. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
All right. It's Unpopular Front. It's a good Substack. I recommend it. Everybody else will be back here tomorrow. Hopefully about the color will be back in my skin, and I'll get a good night's rest.
All right.
So we'll see y'all then. Peace. Thanks, John.
Thanks a lot, Jim.